All right, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Thank you for joining us. This is part 5 of our, which is unbelievable, again, of our Navigating the Coronavirus Economy series that we started here several weeks back to help keep you informed and give you some ideas, tips, suggestions, anything to help you get some ideas to implement in your business to help not only survive this coronavirus situation, but thrive and be in a position to thrive post. And so today's presentation will be focused on how you can implement and structure support and training for your staff and for your franchisees in a remote or virtual work environment. And so to help give us some insight into that, I've asked Aubrey Janik to join us. She's part of the Big Sky franchise team of consultants and is focused, most of her attention is on our Fran leadership system, which is a cloud-based video training system designed for this kind of an environment. So I thought, who better to bring in than someone who is living in this world and working in that condition than Aubrey. Give you a little background about Aubrey. She has been a franchisee, has been a small business owner, and in fact, the franchise that she was part of was actually the youngest franchisee ever to join that system in a system with hundreds of franchisees. So I think that is just a wonderful, amazing fact that we have going on. And so we are thrilled to have Aubrey to share with us some of the wisdom, nuggets of information on building a virtual and remote staff and training system. So Aubrey, with that, we'll go ahead and turn things over to you here.
Awesome. Well, it is great to join all of y'all today. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I have a PowerPoint presentation that I will share with you guys. And while I'm going through that, I'll explain kind of the benefits of training your staff virtually and how you can really adapt your current training methods that you use in a virtual way so that you can do it efficiently and effectively moving forward. So let me share my screen with you guys. Okay, so can you guys see the PowerPoint?
I cannot. No.
Okay, hold on one second.
There we go.
Okay, now you can?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So so it's virtual franchise training, how to set this up, how to implement it, and what it can do for you in your business. So what I'm going to be covering in this, I will be talking about how to set up your virtual training, what to do once you've set it up, and how to kind of like maintain it, and then some of the best practices. And then at the end, I will also be talking about Frame Leadership, which is our platform that we've developed at Big Sky to help franchisors and franchisees more effectively train their staff. So first off, the question of what do we need to know in regards to virtual training, and three important kind of notes to make in regards to virtual training is, one is that virtual training is incredibly cost effective compared to like the in-person counterpart of virtual training, because with in-person training, you have to worry about the labor associated with training your staff. You have to worry about transportation costs. There's also other costs like utilities, internet, phone bills, all of that stuff. And with online training, you don't have that same factors put into it because it's automated. It's kind of a one-time deal. You create the platform, you create the programs, and then from there, it's just set and you need to just keep it going. So there's not as much ongoing costs associated with training your staff virtually as compared to in person. The other thing that's important about virtual training is that it's more efficient. It doesn't require as much manpower. It doesn't require as much updating, as much time, and it requires just less energy all around. And so it's an incredibly efficient way to train your staff on an ongoing basis. And lastly, it's streamlined and it's automated. With virtual training, there is the upfront investment that you have to make, and that is the investment of your time, as well as some sort of money oftentimes is required to get a virtual training program implemented. But once you've put that time into creating the program, to creating the content, it's not something that needs to be updated on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis. It's something that maybe once a quarter, twice a year, you have to go in, update the information, make sure that all the information is still relevant, and that's really all you have to do. So it's really automated from the moment that you finish the program going forward. So it makes it really easy, really seamless for the franchisor to train their franchisees and their staff. So next begs the question of how can you train your staff virtually, and what types of trainings can be utilized in a virtual space? And my answer to that question is really any type of training. I think that if you can train somebody in person, you can almost always implement that exact same training method in a virtual world. And so a few examples here, but definitely these aren't the only examples, is discovery days. If you have a franchise or a business that requires special certification, the training for that certification could be done online. You could do initial training for your franchisees who just sign on. You could do new hire training for your franchisees staff, as well as corporate training and initial and reoccurring training. So the way that you can set up your virtual training in an online space is whatever training you need to do, whether it's upfront training when you hire on a franchisee, whether it's general manager training for your staff, or even training that you need to do on a quarterly or yearly basis, you can set those up so that they just automatically go out every 6 months, every year, whenever they need to occur. And so it makes it really easy and really manageable to make sure that your staff is always trained and always kind of staying up to the standard. Next is the question of, well, how do you set up virtual training? So you know that you can use virtual training, you know the different methods that you can go about using this system, but how do you set up an effective virtual training platform? And there's kind of multiple phases to this process. The first phase would be, you would need to first figure out kind of what does your training system currently look like. I'm assuming that the majority of businesses, at least the majority of the businesses that are on this call, probably have some sort of training procedure that they follow in person. And so what does that look like? What is the flow of training for a new franchisee that enters the system? Typically, they'll go to some sort of discovery day. There'll be like initial 1 to 3 week long training after they sign a franchise agreement. And then after that, there's the training for their staff as well. And so it's important to really define what that training looks like and kind of what the flow of that is. And once you really defined, okay, this is what our training looks like, this is what we require from our training, from there you can figure out what type of that training can be online versus which of that training has to be done in person. And it's important to realize that whenever you're going through and you're laying out your training that you currently have for your company, it's important to understand that probably more than you think can be transitioned into an online space. And so it really is important to really thoughtfully think out, okay, what portions of our training program absolutely have to be done in person. And obviously sometimes there's no workarounds for that. You do have to sometimes train people in person, but the majority of your training oftentimes can be transitioned online, and really kind of segmenting that out will be really helpful when it comes to building your online training program. Next is to understand how your training should be presented, because the fact is that certain types of trainings will require different formats. Sometimes a message is better presented in video format. Sometimes it's better in like PDF or written format. Sometimes it's presentation format. And sometimes it's in the form of like quizzes or tests. And so it's important to understand and to kind of be aware of these different avenues that you can go down when presenting training information, and to figure out, okay, what portions of your program would be better suited for video versus which portions of the program would be better suited for PowerPoints, for the written word, for things like that. So once you have a good idea of these three things, really creating your program from there is just kind of filling in the blank and putting all of the pieces together. Next is examples of virtual training. So oftentimes whenever I talk with people about transitioning their training programs from the in-person format into an online space, they have a hard time picturing what that would look like. And oftentimes they say something along the lines of, well, our discovery days have to be in person, or our initial training has to be done in person, or there's no workarounds for this. And oftentimes there is, but it's just sometimes hard to picture if you're not used to training your staff virtually. So here I've outlined 2 examples of real viable ways you could go about doing virtual training. And the first option, or the first example, is a discovery day. Discovery days are perfect examples of what you could do virtually, because almost anything you do in an in-person discovery day can be replicated in some form over the internet. And the example that I have here is typically during a discovery day, you'll spend the kind of a few hours or the afternoon visiting different franchisees, kind of giving the prospect an idea of what the day in the life of a franchisee looks like. And the way you could replicate this in an online space is doing kind of a day in the lifestyle video, is taking a camera and then following around a franchisee for a few hours or for an entire day and kind of capture what a day in the life of that franchisee is. You can capture what their routine is, you can capture what the procedures are, you can capture what it's like to be involved with that company. And that will give the franchise prospect a lot of information on the brand, how the brand works, and what the operations are. Next is oftentimes in discovery day, it's the franchise prospect's way of getting to know the corporate staff and learning what each person's role is, what they do for the company, and what they can do for them. And if you were to take this style of meeting to a virtual setting, you could do talking head and interview style videos. So you could interview your corporate team and you can have them maybe answer a list of 10 frequently asked questions. You can have them give their background information. You can have them give a rundown of what they do for the company and what they can do for the franchisee. And then lastly, you can of course have a lot of written format documents as well. So you could write a PDF or a PowerPoint document showing what the overview of the company is, what the objectives are, the processes, kind of giving general information that is well received in written format. And the best part is that you can always implement quizzes and tests at the end of these trainings to make sure that whoever's watching it and whoever's going through this virtual discovery day isn't just mindlessly scrolling through the information. They're not just going through the motions, but they're actually taking in the information at hand. And you can ensure that that is the reality by presenting tests and quizzes that need to be passed with a certain grade at the end.
Hey, Aubrey, this is Tom. I had a quick question just to interject here as I'm listening to this. For implementing a quiz and a test on a discovery day, it may sound a little unusual to a certain extent when you think about a sales presentation, but could you give an example maybe of what something might look like for a discovery day? Maybe we don't call it I guess we probably don't call it a quiz or a test, but maybe give an example of what that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe a better word would be maybe an evaluation or even an overview, like saying a discovery end of day overview, and maybe asking questions like how many, like for example, if it was a restaurant franchise, saying a list of 5 questions, and one of those being, on average, how long does it take to prep in the morning? Or on average, how many employees does the average franchisee have? Something really simple that doesn't necessarily require a whole lot of background knowledge. It's not something that's super intimidating, but it does ensure that the person actually took the time and the energy to watch the discovery day.
Great, thank you.
So then as for initial training, kind of on the same process as discovery day, is you're going to find that there's different formats that fit different subjects and different objectives better than others. And so for an initial training video, like the type of training you would go through after you sign a franchise agreement, doing video how-to guides would be an excellent way to train your staff. So on the same example of like a restaurant, you could do videos on how to prep the food or how to kind of make the recipes or how to clean up at the end of the day. You could also pair those same how-to guides with like PDF guides. And so Some people work really well with video. Some people like to have it written out so that they can read it. And the great thing about online virtual training is that you can provide both of those for however the user digests information best. And with the training, I see that's where quizzes and tests are going to be extremely valuable, because if you're having a franchisee go through their initial training before they can open up a franchise, you want to make sure that that person is very knowledgeable. You want to make sure that they're well trained, that they know what they're getting into, and they know what to do. And the way to ensure that is by doing these quizzes or tests. And you don't necessarily have to call it quizzes and tests. Like Tom said, is you can always do evaluations. You can always have it be like a end of day recap. There's a lot of ways to word it in a less intimidating manner. But it's important, in my opinion, that if you're going to be doing online training, you have some sort of measures in place to ensure that the people are actually taking part in the training.
Right, and this is, Tom, just to jump in, kind of that certain level of accountability, right, Aubrey?
Absolutely.
We want, especially for that training, accountability, making sure they get it, and certainly from a franchisor to a franchisee perspective, helping give that extra liability protection layer added in that says, franchisee 27 passed, this assessment or quiz that we put in place on, April 24th, 2020 kind of a thing. So
100%. And to that same point, I mean, I think that is one of the other benefits of virtual training versus in-person training is the liability aspect. Is at the end of the day with virtual training, as well as in-person training, it's up to the franchisee who has signed the franchise agreement to really make sure that they're prepared. And you as the franchisor try to provide as many resources as you can to ensure that that happens. And by having everything written out online, super accessible and easy to reach, it makes it so that the franchisee can access that information all the time, so they can always revisit it if they need to, but it's also there for reference if they end up struggling or having some issues later on down the road. So it's a huge win-win situation from a lot of different angles. So now for best practices in regards to kind of creating your online training program and what that can look like. And the first tip that I have in regards to this is don't overcomplicate it. I think that so often whenever people are developing an online program, like an online training system, they view the task as one that is extremely daunting. And they know that they need to create this training program and they just don't really know where to start. And at the beginning of this PowerPoint, I talked about how you should kind of create a workflow of what your training program looks like. And at the end of the day, once you have that workflow defined, it really is just a matter of putting the pieces together. And so it's something that you have to just take step by step. You can't overcomplicate it. You can't get ahead of yourself. If you just kind of take one step after the next, then eventually the program will be completed and it's much easier than you would have thought it would have been. The next point is, and this is something that I talk to people about all the time, is the aspect of like quality and professionalism in your training program. And to that point, I made the point of you're not a professional filmmaker, and that's okay. I think that too many people get caught up with quality. And with technology the way that it is, you can get really good quality video, really good quality audio, and really good quality content by just using your phone. And so you don't need to hire a filmmaker. You don't need to have like a professional camera. You don't need to have professional audio. As long as you have I would say a relatively modern phone and you have a computer, you can create really great content, and you don't have to worry about, or you shouldn't stress about, how professional the content is. As long as the content is well thought out, if it's easy to understand, and if it has just even the most basic quality behind it, like the quality of an iPhone, your content will be good enough and will be really good for people to use for training. And then the last tip is you already have everything you need to create an online training system. If you're here, you have a business. If you're a franchisor, then you have the processes in place, and it really is just a matter of taking that process that you already have, taking the systems that you've already created, and transferring them online. And that process is easier than you would think it would be. And so you already have the tools, you already have the information you need. It's just really a matter of transferring where it's stored. And then next is tools and resources. So these are some of the ways that I think are very easy tools and resources to use to create a really solid online training program without a lot of upfront expense and without a whole lot of like additional know-how. So the first is for video. So if you are somebody who's wanting to do video content, you can use platforms like Vimeo or YouTube and host those on there. And this isn't an 100% ideal scenario because the fact is the security with YouTube or Vimeo aren't going to be as good as they would be if you had like a private hosted website, but they are really good, especially if you're in a pinch and you need to develop an online training program relatively quickly. And so don't overthink this step. You don't necessarily have to have a professional hosted website, and using YouTube or using Vimeo, especially for a temporary basis, can be a really great solution for video hosting. On the same kind of topic with written format, you can use just regular run-of-the-mill software to create really professional and really great PDF documents, PowerPoints, and how-to guides. And you can do that by either using like Word, Microsoft. You can also use Google Docs or Dropbox Paper. As for how you can share this information, there are a lot of resources out there, but just to not overthink it, you could even use something as easy and as simple as Google Drive or Dropbox, and you can grant people access or revoke access as you need in order to ensure that the people have the materials they need in order to train themselves. And so using those tools that are free for the most part are really great resources to turn to. And then lastly is like communication tools. So you can use something as simple as email, or you can even sign up for services like Slack, which are also very affordable. And these are ways that you can distribute the content out. And so this is also something that I think too many people overcomplicate, is that if you have quizzes, if you have videos that you want to distribute, you don't need to overcomplicate the process of handing those out to your franchisees. You can use email to do it, and it can be as simple as just attaching it to the email and then sending it to the recipient. But the negative of all of these tools and resources is that they all don't work seamlessly together. And it very much is like kind of solving a puzzle and then having to make those puzzle pieces fit in a seamless way. It's definitely possible. It's really not that difficult, but it can be time consuming, and it sometimes can cause a bit of a learning curve with the person who's being trained. And so that's where Frame Leadership has come in. And that's where Tom, Big Sky, and myself have developed Frame Leadership in order to solve that problem. Frame Leadership provides all of what I've talked about and more. And it does it all in one place that's super easy to use, that's extremely intuitive, and that can be updated on an ongoing basis. So Frame Leadership is your all-in-one hosting solution for training your franchisees, for training your corporate staff, and for training anybody within your corporate entity. So we offer video hosting. We also offer hosting for any like written or PowerPoint type of content. We offer the creation of quizzes and tests. And so through Frame Leadership, you can easily create quizzes and tests and then grade those quizzes and tests right on the platform. And the best part is that it's all hosted in one place. And so you don't have to worry about going to YouTube for your videos, going to Dropbox for your written quizzes, going to Google for your various other materials. It's all in one place, which means that you can access it, you can grade it, and you can edit it really easily from the comfort of your own home and with the click of just a few buttons. And the best part is that we can help you through the process of developing that content. And that's kind of one of the biggest barriers that I see often when talking to franchisors who are wanting to develop an online training program is they don't know where to start, they don't know how to start, but they know that they need an online training program enabled. And that's where we can go in and we can help you plan out your content. We can upload the content for you on the franchise platform, and then we can also manage the content on an ongoing basis. And so that's kind of the rundown on Frame Leadership, as well as the benefits of online training. I do offer one-on-one Frame Leadership walkthroughs where I can go through and answer individual questions. I can give you a rundown of the website. I'll do a screen share and show you kind of how the site works, what it looks like from the franchisor's perspective, as well as the user's perspective. And I can also answer any questions about the platform there. And so I provided my email here. It's Aubrey@bigskyfranchise.com. So if anybody has questions about frame leadership, feel free to send me an email. And then now I'm free to answer any questions as well as Tom.
Great, thank you, Aubrey. Thank you. And one of the things for us to think about here for our clients and people who are on the call that Aubrey and I have talked about is normally there are onboarding fees and extras and this and that. And for our clients that are coming in that are currently working with us, we're able to help onboard you just as part of the process without any extra fees right now with coaching and training and walking you through how to use this system. So this is a great opportunity to use a tool like this that we had already created. It's a custom built system and to help you through it. And lastly, if you're not sure, you don't know if you want to do it, or don't want to work with a system like Fran Leadership, that's okay. Aubrey's available. She's really become an expert on online learning platforms and learning management systems. And so even if you want to kind of create your own makeshift solution temporarily, that's okay. Use us as a resource to talk through these and give you some ideas. Are there any questions as we're going through this? And it looks like we've got a fairly small group here. So if you have specific questions for your brand or your system or how you specifically can do that, now would be a great time to ask that. Let's see. I don't know if people can unmute, or feel free to type into the chat box as well here. Well, Aubrey, I had a question for you to ask, to have you kind of expand upon here, which is when someone starts this training process or this video training process, how would you recommend someone get started with just filming or mapping out their day? Is there a formula or a process that you recommend someone start with? You talked a little bit about it, but what might their first 1, 2, or 3 steps be that they take?
So I would say that really the first step is, like what I had mentioned, is first kind of develop what it looks like to train your company. Is what is the requirements that you want out of your training? And is that to where you're wanting to do a discovery day? If so, what does that discovery day look like? And I think it's important to first kind of map it out on paper and figure out what is the objective that you're wanting to reach from training. And without really a clear defined objective, I think it's really easy to jump from idea to idea and from phase to phase without making really any true progress. And so mapping that out on paper or on the computer, I think, is the first step. And I think that's really, really important. And then from there, I think it's really just a matter of going. I think that with something in the online space like this, it's really easy for users and companies to kind of get lost in the phase of planning. And so once you have it mapped out, there's really nothing stopping you from going out and starting to create the content. And so start recording those talking head interview videos, start recording the day in the life videos, and then kind of edit and tweak it from there. And so I think it's just really important that if you need an online system, to just get started and don't get too hung up in the planning phase of things.
Great. Great, and thank you for that. And a question I was thinking about as well, maybe if I'm a franchisor, but maybe I'm not a franchisor, or even if I am, I have employees, or my franchisees have employees at the unit level. How could I create some training, or how would you recommend doing some training for a user, just let's say an average employee level? How would you recommend maybe creating some content or using something like this for those staffers that might be employed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is one of the big benefits of online training, is is training those kind of storefront employees, because that's where the deviation and your guidelines and your kind of rules can really get out of whack. Is if you have 100 different franchises or even 10 different franchises and each franchisee is training their staff slightly different, that's where you can start having some big problems. And so by implementing your training to a virtual space, even with those lower level employees, you really get a sense of uniformity throughout the system. And so with lower level, like storefront staff or like people who are actually on the front lines, creating those videos, I think is an excellent tool. And so taking the staff member through the steps that they need to take on a day-to-day process, whether it be maybe if you're a restaurant, counting the drawer and making the recipes. If you're a different type of franchise, then maybe closing or opening procedures, what the dress code is, what the kind of code of conduct is, taking them through each level of guidelines and expectations. And that this is where I think quizzes and tests will really come in handy, because it ensures that your staff member knows the rules. There's no excuses if they veer from those rules, and it allows you to ensure that everybody is up to par.
Great, thank you. Do we have questions that maybe popped up in, I'm looking in the chat room. I don't see any questions in the chat. Any participants that would like to ask some questions for us to share here? Okay. Well, Aubrey, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your presentation and sharing this with everyone here. We look forward to it. And for those that are still on the line, the great thing is if you'd like to get started with a system like Frame Leadership, we are running our coronavirus economy special right now that's get up and going. For just our out-of-the-box system, it's $99 a month right now. Very affordable, probably less expensive than combining some of those things like a Dropbox and a Vimeo account. It probably is right in line or even less expensive than those options. So Aubrey, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in, and tune in next week for our next series or part of the Navigating Coronavirus Economy. Thank you so much.